Hello and welcome to Picture Astrology. In this video, we will explore the placement of Jupiter in the sign of Virgo. And among other things, Virgo represents limits or limitations like no other zodiac sign does. Whereas Jupiter represents expansion like no other planet in Vedic astrology does. So this interesting combination of expansion and limitation gives rise to many fascinating and desirable results. So we will explore them, and as always we will also see how this placement can affect your physical, mental and emotional well-being. So before we go into the details, there is one important thing to note is that whenever placement of Jupiter is described in any of these signs, most of the descriptions in classical text as well as modern day classical books are replete with a lot of benefic tinge, meaning most of the effects of Jupiter in signs have all the positive connotations. And the biggest reason for that is that the Jupiter itself is the planet which shows your past life good karmas. It is the planet of your purva punyas, and the planet of Purva Punya will bring about your results of past good lives. The way it comes about, that is the prism of that benefic light, which is the sign, that can be different. But because the inherent nature of Jupiter is benefic, therefore most of the descriptions, if you read a book, will be all positive. But it does not mean that Jupiter only gives good effects. No. There are various factors which can cause Jupiter to also give challenging situations and results in your life. One of the most prominent is the sign placement. Sagittarius and Pisces, these are the two signs ruled by Jupiter. And if these two signs fall into any of the negative houses, that means Jupiter becomes a functional malefic in your chart. In that case, even the planet of good karma, Jupiter, can give you very dicey situations in life. And the other thing is that Jupiter inherently is related to higher knowledge and higher wisdom. Jupiter by its own nature is not the planet of physical or sensual pleasures. Jupiter actually represents or tries to bring humanity in general towards a higher purpose in life. Jupiter's job is not to teach you how to earn money. Jupiter's job is not how to make you a living. Jupiter is in its inherent true nature is not related to these things. It's the job of other planets. But when Jupiter is placed in any of the earth character sign, earthy sign, and Virgo is one of the earthy signs, which is ruled by Mercury, then one thing which definitely happens is that the overall horoscope or overall chart, see, first thing a astrologer or a good astrologer does when he looks at a chart is find the inclination of that individual whose chart he is checking. And when a planet like Jupiter, a knowledgeable and wisdom planet like Jupiter, falls into earthy sign, especially in the Virgo sign, which we will see why in few minutes, if it falls in such an earthy sign, then the horoscope, the individual, the native, his natural tendency becomes less interested in plain philosophy, plain ideas, and more interested in things which work in this physical world. And therefore, even if there is a high degree of spirituality when Jupiter is placed in earthy sign, especially in the sign of Virgo, then these people, they would find spiritual solace when they work in this world, when they help people physically, mentally, feed poor, give education to children, or in any ways, help improve the life or physical life of people around them. So even the spirituality, when it comes to for Jupiter in the earthy sign of Virgo, has a clear tinge of tangible physical aspect. basically helping people in real life. They will not be satisfied by merely sitting in a corner and doing meditation. And I'm not saying one is better and the other one is not. It's just that even when an overall chart has a high degree of spiritual leanings, but Jupiter is in the sign of Virgo, these people, their spirituality, the way it will manifest, that it will have a very clear connection to activities in this world. Now let's quickly talk about what could be the effect on physique when Jupiter is in the sign of Virgo. And this will manifest especially when this combination impacts your first house or ascendant. So the impact here is much like Jupiter in the sign of other sign of Mercury, which is Gemini, but being the earthy sign, the stature of the person is actually good but shorter than when it is in other mercurial sign, and it is little bit more stout. So you can say like a middle stature and a little stout body is very common with Jupiter in the sign of Virgo, especially when it impacts your first house. And obviously having a benefic like Jupiter affect your first house is a very good indication of a robust physique. And unless there are other negative aspects or Jupiter is severely afflicted, it gives person a good health. Now also this is a very intellectual position. Mercury, as you know, is the planet of intellect. It is your brain power, how your mind works. And Jupiter anyhow is the planet of knowledge and wisdom, higher knowledge and higher wisdom. So definitely this position shows that the person gets deep interest in learning new things. And as we discussed, this is an earthy sign. So things they like to learn will be very practical in nature. And as we discussed in the beginning, that the sign of Virgo is the sign of limitations. Because if you see the symbol of Virgo, it is a young girl sitting in a boat. And the boat is actually in the middle of an ocean or a sea. And in that small boat, the girl only has a little lamp in his hand and a little bit of grain. Many people describe it as wheat. So you see, it is a very constrained environment. We're at the top of the ocean with no other help and very little items to survive on. And therefore, the amount of micromanagement, the amount of planning and tracking which a Virgo can do is hardly possible for any other sign. So what this placement shows us, they not only have inclination towards learning and that the learning has to be in some practical aspect, but they also have a great eye for detail. They can look for small things which others cannot. So this position therefore is actually great indicator of accountants or chartered accountants, CAs, CPAs, banking people, or anybody who requires a tremendous amount of details. Now with this placement, suppose 9th house is also pretty strong, then it also shows very good interest in occult sciences, especially astrology. And typically people with this placement will be very good with mathematical side of the astrology. And at the same time, they will also be able to predict real life events if this combination has anything to do with the second house. So overall, very good placement to give a very well temperament for studies and learning. And since it is a physical and earthy sign, it also is known to give good interest in arts. It also known to give love for fragrance and scent, because fragrance of all kind comes under earthy element. So if Venus is well placed in your chart with this placement, then you will be interested in some or the other kind of art form. Also, you could have great interest or great affinity towards different type of fragrances, or you could also be a merchant in that field related to these things. Now, in terms of your family connections, in terms of your relationships, Jupiter has a great say in that, because Jupiter is the planet of bliss or happiness, the true joy which you can get from any of your relationships, the fulfillment. And it definitely shows the amount of child or kids you have. So what does this mean for number of kids? Basically, Jupiter in the dual sign of Virgo, when especially if say 5th house is, well, that has to be there for when we are talking to kids, but say Mercury has an aspect on it, then it definitely shows more than one kids. It is very much like the placement of Jupiter in the other sign of Mercury, which is Gemini, that it shows more than one. And in fact that theme will go on related to the houses in which Sagittarius and Pisces are placed. So say if Sagittarius is in your 3rd house, which shows your brothers and sisters, so if you have Jupiter in the sign of Virgo with say 3rd house lord aspecting it, then you will definitely have more than one brothers and sisters. And overall it is actually a good sign for relationships, personal relationships, family relationships, and the happiness from those relationships, unless obviously Sagittarius and Pisces falls into negative or evil houses. So friends, this was my quick and basic analysis of Jupiter in the sign of Virgo. We will definitely look into details when we talk about this placement for each of the 12 ascendants. That would give us more sharper and precise predictive platform. But thank you so much for spending your time with me. Please do like and subscribe to my channel to continue to get updates like this. And I thank you again and hope to see you again soon. Bye bye.